The lantern that glowed only at dusk. A softly spoken storyteller's original tale. The coastal village of Bramblewick had always been a quiet place tucked gently between the sea and the soft rise of the cliffs. Its cottages stood close together as though sharing warmth, their pale stone walls softened by years of ocean wind. Fishing boats rocked lazily in the harbor, even when tide, as though dreaming. Moss grew thick between the cobblestones, and the chimneys leaned ever so slightly toward the sea, acknowledging the direction from which the breeze eternally blew. Most days, Bramblewick appeared unchanged from one century to the next. But there was one thing about the village that was not like any other: the lantern on the western hill. It was an old iron lantern, older than the church, older than the harbor docks, older even than the memory of the oldest fisherman still alive. Its post stood about 12 feet high, made of weathered oak bolted into the stone with rusted hardware so ancient that no one dared loosen it. The lantern's glass panes, worn thin and fogged by time, were always clean, yet somehow faintly clouded. And though it had no candles, no oil, no wires running to it, though it was completely hollow, the lantern glowed. Not always, only at dusk. Never before, never after. Just as the sun's last line of gold slipped behind the horizon, the lantern flickered softly to life, a warm amber light, emerging as though from nowhere. It cast a gentle halo across the hill, illuminating the path that curved around the cliffs. The villagers never interfered with it. They regarded the lantern the way one might regard a kind neighbor, quiet, dependable, and best left in peace. Children would dare each other to touch it, though none quite had the courage. Adults simply nodded to it in passing, acknowledging its presence with the same easy acceptance reserved for tides, seasons, and friendly ghosts. For generations, the lantern had simply been, and no one questioned it. At least, no one except Clara Pennington, who arrived in Bramblewick on a soft blue morning in early spring. Clara had never heard of the lantern until her first week in town. She had come searching for rest, having grown tired of her old life, a busy city routine of meetings, deadlines, and more nights awake than asleep. She craved quiet, and something about the whisper of Bramblewick's coastline seemed to call to her. She rented a small room above the bakery, unpacked one suitcase, and wandered the village with a kind of relieved exhaustion. On the 7th evening of her stay, she noticed a small gathering of villagers heading up the hill. They walked slowly, without hurry, and stood at the top looking westward. She followed out of curiosity. The wind carried the faint scent of rosemary from the cliffs as she stepped onto the hilltop. People murmured among themselves, smiling softly. One child tugged at his mother's sleeve. "Will it happen soon?" Any moment now, the mother whispered. Clara looked around. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the unlit lantern. Then, without sound or spark, it glowed. First, a dim flicker, then a strong, steady amber glow, warm like a memory. Clara gasped softly. The villagers smiled knowingly. It only ever lights at dusk, said a voice behind her. She turned to see an older man with wind-swept silver hair leaning on a walking stick carved with intricate knots. Do you know how it works? Clara asked. He chuckled. No one does, though plenty have tried to guess. Before she could ask more, he tipped his hat as though that were the end of the matter, and began the slow journey downhill. Clara remained a long while, watching the lantern's warmth pulse gently as night settled over Bramblewick. It felt peaceful, comforting, almost alive. She could not stop thinking about it. Chapter 1: The Whispering Wind. Clara soon discovered that the villagers didn't mind her curiosity, but they didn't share it either. Whenever she asked about the lantern, she received the same kind of answer she might have gotten if she'd asked why the clouds moved or why the stars shone. It's just the way it is, the baker said, sliding warm brioche rolls onto a tray. It lights to keep us company, said the grocer. Always has. My grandmother said it was a gift, murmured the seamstress as she measured fabric. But no one could explain how. One afternoon, Clara visited the village library, a small stone building that smelled of warm dust, lavender oil, and the faint sweetness of old paper. A soft-spoken librarian named Marjorie helped her search for any mention of the lantern. Together they spread out local history books, thick tomes with yellowed pages, flecked with notes and scribbles from generations of villagers. But the lantern was barely mentioned. A line here, a faded sketch there, but nothing that explained its origin. Sometimes, Marjorie said, things don't need explanations to matter. Clara nodded politely, but her curiosity wasn't satisfied. That evening, she went to the hill alone. A soft breeze stirred her scarf, carrying with it the cool scent of the sea and the faint hum of distant waves. A few other villagers were there, as always, waiting quietly for the glow. When the lantern lit, it glowed brighter than usual just for a moment, and Clara thought she saw something shimmer inside the glass. A movement, a small swirl of light, a flicker like a breath. She stepped closer. The glow warmed her skin. Someone touched her shoulder. It was the silver-haired man from earlier, leaning on his carved walking stick. You see it, he said softly. Clara swallowed. See what? He smiled gently. Curiosity. It's a good thing. Come walk with me tomorrow. I'll tell you what little I know. Before she could reply, he started down the path again, his silhouette growing smaller in the fading light. Clara stayed by the lantern a while longer, watching it glow and pulse with its steady, mysterious warmth. She felt drawn to it, as though it had something to tell her. Chapter 2: The Keeper of Small Truths. The next morning, Clara found the silver-haired man sitting on a bench by the harbor, feeding crumbs to the gulls. He introduced himself as Elias Gray. "I'm not the lantern's keeper," he said with a soft laugh, "though some might jokingly call me that, but I have lived near it longer than most." They walked slowly toward the cliffs, Elias's walking stick tapping rhythmically against the stones. "When I was a boy," Elias said, "my grandmother told me that the lantern didn't shine for the village. It shone for someone." "For who?" Clara asked. "That's the question, isn't it?" He smiled faintly. "Some thought it glowed for sailors, others for lost souls. Some said it was for those who needed guiding, not in the literal sense, mind you, but in the softer, quieter ways." Clara frowned. "But how does it work?" "No one knows," Elias said. "It has no wick, no flame, no electricity, and yet, every dusk, without fail, it glows," Clara whispered. He nodded. "Yes, like a heartbeat." They reached the hill. The lantern stood above them, still and silent in the bright morning light. "I've tried to understand it," Elias admitted. "Spent years watching it, listening, but some mysteries aren't meant to be solved the way we solve everyday problems. Some are meant to be felt." Clara reached out, almost touching the iron frame, then hesitated. "Will it harm me?" "Never," Elias said gently. "If anything, it might warm you." She let her fingertips brush the metal. It was warm, unexpectedly so, given the cool breeze. "How?" she murmured. Elias smiled softly. "That, my dear, is where the mystery begins." Chapter 3: The Journal in the Attic. Clara's fascination only deepened. Over the next few days, she found herself visiting the hill earlier and earlier, sketching the lantern in her notebook, studying the ground around it, taking notes. One evening, Marjorie from the library approached her with a small cloth-wrapped parcel. "I found this in the attic," Marjorie said. "It belonged to one of our former librarians. Thought you might find it interesting." Inside the cloth was a small leather-bound journal, its pages fragile and sepia-toned. "Clara, read it by lamplight in her room above the bakery." The journal belonged to a woman named Eleanor Brooke, who had lived in Bramblewick nearly a century ago. Her entries were detailed and tender, filled with descriptions of village life, changing seasons, and the lantern she called the gentle heart of the cliffs. One entry caught Clara's attention. March 12th. The lantern glowed brighter tonight. I thought I saw something move within it, a small shimmer, like the faint outline of a person or memory. Perhaps I am imagining things. Still, there is something alive about its glow, something kind. Clara felt a chill, not of fear, but of recognition. She'd seen the same shimmer. Another entry read, April 3rd. I believe the lantern lights for those who seek something, not something lost, but something waiting to be found. Clara closed the journal slowly, thinking, was the lantern glowing for her? And if so, why? Chapter 4. The Evening of the Strong Glow. A week passed. Clara's curiosity softened into a quiet companionship. Each dusk, she would join the small group of villagers waiting for the lantern's warm breath of light. But one evening, something changed. The sky was streaked with deep peach and lavender, the sea calm as glass. The villagers gathered quietly, Elias among them, standing with their hands in their pockets or folded behind their backs. As the sun dipped low, Clara felt a strange stillness settle over the hill. The lantern flickered, then glowed. But this time it glowed brighter than ever before. A radiant golden light poured from it, illuminating the grass, the faces of the villagers, even the stones beneath their feet. Clara felt warmth wrap around her, gentle as a blanket. A soft gasp rose from the crowd. Inside the lantern, the shimmer grew stronger, a swirling shape of light, delicate and moving, like a fragment of dawn captured in glass. Clara stepped closer. Careful, Elias said gently, though not with warning, more with reverence. Clara leaned in. The shimmer expanded, then rested softly against the glass, as though acknowledging her presence. Her heart fluttered. Do you see it? She whispered. I think, Elias said, it sees you. The glow softened, returning to its normal amber hue. Clara backed away slowly, breath catching in her throat. Something had changed. She could feel it. Why did it do that? She asked Elias after the others drifted away. He watched the lantern carefully. Perhaps, he said, it had something to tell you. Chapter 5. The Story Hidden in Light. The next morning dawned foggy and cool. Clara climbed the hill early, before the baker's first loaf left the oven, before the fishermen launched their boats. The lantern stood quiet, but she approached it with a sense of purpose. She placed a hand on its post. The wood felt warm beneath her palm. I don't know what you are, she whispered, or why you glow, but I want to understand. A breeze stirred the grass, and in the distant harbor, a gull cried. She placed her forehead gently against the post, closing her eyes. And then, just for a moment, she felt something. Not a voice, not a word, not even a whisper, more like a memory brushing against her mind. A shoreline, soft laughter, a hand slipping from another's, a lantern shining in the distance. She gasped softly and stepped back. The lantern remained still, dark, and silent. But Clara knew then it didn't glow because of magic or mystery or legend. It glowed because it remembered. It remembered people, moments, feelings, longing, and it glowed for those who needed reminding, not of the past, but of themselves. Chapter 5. The Story Hidden in Light. The next morning dawned foggy and cool. Clara climbed the hill early, before the baker's first loaf left the oven, before the fishermen launched their boats. The lantern stood quiet, but she approached it with a sense of purpose. She placed a hand on its post. The wood felt warm beneath her palm. "I don't know what you are," she whispered, "or why you glow, but I want to understand." A breeze stirred the grass, and in the distant harbor, a gull cried. She placed her forehead gently against the post, closing her eyes. And then, just for a moment, she felt something. Not a voice, not a word, not even a whisper. More like a memory brushing against her mind. A shoreline, soft laughter, a hand slipping from another's, a lantern shining in the distance. She gasped softly and stepped back. The lantern remained still, dark, and silent. But Clara knew then it didn't glow because of magic or mystery or legend. It glowed because it remembered. It remembered people, moments, feelings, longing, and it glowed for those who needed reminding, not of the past, but of themselves. Chapter 6. The Light Within. Over the next few days, Clara felt something shift inside her. The lantern had touched her not in any dramatic way, but in a quiet one, like a tide washing gently over stones. She realized she had arrived in Bramblewick carrying more weight than she knew. Exhaustion, loneliness, a sense of drifting. But now she felt anchored somehow. One evening, as the lantern prepared to glow again, Clara stood beside Elias. "I think I understand," she said softly. He nodded, as though he had been waiting. "The lantern doesn't shine for the village," she said. "Not really. No. It shines for people who need something gentle, something that doesn't ask anything of them." Elias smiled, eyes bright. "It shines," he said, "for those looking to find their way back to themselves." When the lantern glowed that night, its light felt especially warm, as though wrapping Clara in a quiet embrace. And for the first time since she could remember, she didn't feel lost. She felt home. Epilogue: The Lantern at Dusk. Clara stayed in Bramblewick. Not forever, perhaps, but long enough for her heart to settle, to breathe again. She became part of the rhythm of the village, helping Marjorie organize books, sharing tea with Elias on foggy mornings, learning the names of the fishermen and the stories behind each scarred boat. Every dusk, she walked to the hill and stood with the others, sometimes alone, sometimes in company, but always with a sense of calm anticipation. The lantern glowed. It always glowed. And though Clara no longer sought its mystery, she cherished it. It was a reminder. Some lights shine not to reveal the world, but to remind us that we are part of it. Every evening, as the warm glow spread across the hill, she felt grateful for the lantern that glowed only at dusk, a quiet friend, a gentle heart, a steady guide for anyone who needed light soft enough to rest beneath. And every night, Bramblewick slept peacefully beneath its watch.